Hi, my name is Siege and we're here in my home studio in Belgium, where today I thought it would be cool to go through my track Rhymes, which dropped on Toolroom Trax just the other day. It's actually a pretty interesting one, this track, because you might know I'm big on using samples, but for this track I used mostly samples from my own sample pack. So I created this record at a time where I wasn't feeling too inspired, but I had just done a sample pack for Toolroom called the Trademark Series 2, and I thought it would be cool to try and create a track with just samples from that sample pack. So we're gonna dive into the project now and I'll show you how the track came about and how I used my own samples to create a new record. So here's our project. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. I only got 34 channels, which isn't too much, and one of them is a kick that I'm not using, so it's actually 33. We'll go over the channels one by one and I'll explain what they're doing. So as I said, I started this record after I did the Toolroom sample pack Siege Trademark Series Volume 2, and I thought, let's have a play with samples and see what I can come up with. So I started basically with the groove, which is this part here. I thought it sounded pretty cool, but we needed a vocal to go over it to keep it interesting, because it's a solid groove, but nothing more than that. So the one thing, or the main element that doesn't come from my own sample pack is the vocal. I went on to Splice. I figured a rap vocal would sound great on this record. So I searched for one that I thought was cool, and I ended up using this one.
Cold, these brothers my guys, know that they fly, know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my side. See,
it has been used a couple of times before, unfortunately, but that's the way it goes with splice vocals. I thought it worked well on the record, so I ran with it. I took the sample and there's not much processing on there. I got the CLA vocals, which is one of my favorite plugins to process vocals. Just a little bit of compression, a little bit of reverb, a little bit of delay. Vocal Fun, which is a stutter tool from Ableton itself. It just adds a little bit of texture to the vocal.
Cold, these brothers my guys, know that they fly, know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my side. CJ Ike, now I gotta roll with ice.
Just makes it a little bit cooler. I got a filter to filter the vocal in throughout the record. And then I got this Build It effects rack that I built, which basically washes out the vocal towards the end of the breakdown. So you can see automation is going up here, and it's basically adding reverb and delay. And I'm also opening up the reverb from the CLA more towards the end. So let's hear what that sounds like.
Know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my side. CJ Ike, now I gotta roll with ice.
Just makes it bigger towards the end of the breakdown. This is a dry one.
Cold, these brothers my guys. No, I keep boys by my side. CJ.
Just so you can hear both variations side to side. Then we got some vocal stutters over here, which I just cut from the audio just to fill out the track. Very subtle, but it works. And then I got this vocal, which just came from the same sample pack as the main vocal. And then I created a reverse reverb for the vocal just to introduce the vocal.
Cold, these brothers my guys, know that they fly, know that they ride or die.
So that's for the vocal elements. Then let's move on to the drums. Got a kick, which is a kick from my sample pack. Nothing too special about it. I think I shortened it a little bit because it was a bit too long together with the bass, too much low end information, so I shortened it a little bit to make everything sit better in the mix. I got a top kick, which is just another kick, EQ to loads out of it. I always add a top kick because it will give you more control over your kick. You can push the top kick a little bit harder, so the kick cuts through your mix without having to push the low end too much. Then onto the bass line. The main element here is this. Just again a bass line from my sample pack. You can see the name here, it's called Generation. I layered it with this bass. Just to fill out the low end a little bit more, and then I added an extra kick on the offbeat to fill that gap. What I've done with this main bass line is I've added some compression to even out the dynamic range. So without it, the volume difference between the silent part and the loud part is a bit bigger. So we use compression just to squash everything out and make the volume more evenly. And this again makes it easier to mix it in. And then I add a little bit of track spacer. Basically this is working, so whenever the bass 1 is playing, that's this one, it's ducking some frequencies on bass 2. You can see that here. And that's just to make sure those two bass lines work together. On the channel, I got some decapitator and sidechain. Decapitator groups everything together, and sidechain side change with the kick. I always use Kickstart from Nicky Romero. I think it's easy and just sounds great together with the kick. Onto my hi-hats, simple hi-hat. Again from my sample pack, hi-hat 2 from sample pack. Just like to layer hats. This makes them sound a bit thicker without how to say it. It just makes the sound fuller basically by layering hi-hats, which gives you a fatter sound. Then I got a loop. This is just straight from the sample pack. It's called Shaker Loop Direction. And I didn't do anything with it because I put quite some effort in it when I was making the sample pack. So I tried to make interesting shaker loops. It's not just the shaker that's playing the 16ths. There's volumes going up and down. There is maybe a little bit of panning, or not with this one. You got the open hats coming in, and the decay from the hi-hat is opening up, so it's getting longer and shorter, which makes it interesting. And it just adds a lot of movement to the record. Without this loop, it's a bit boring. It just adds a lot of movement. Then we got open hat, just very simple, and a right loop coming in later as well. You just want to have closed hi-hats, open hi-hats, rides to keep things happening throughout the track, so you can bring them in, take them out, and that provides you with little changes in the track that keep everything interesting. On the group I got an EQ, cutting out low frequencies that we don't need to get a clean mix. Then the snare, again, this is one from sample pack. Nothing on there. On the hi-hats, on the snare, on the drums, there's nothing processing wise on there. Reason being is I put a lot of time and effort in the sample pack processing everything the way I usually do. So there is no need to process them extra because it's already in the samples. I only got this Toolroom plugin Infinite, which is a cool little plugin, and it's washing out the snares here in the breakdown. Similar as what I'm doing on the vocal with the chain I created.
I keep boys by my side. I keep boys by my side.
Just makes everything very wet, and then when it's dropping, it's all very dry again. It creates an interesting effect. On its own, the snare, it sounds good, but it's a bit boring. So what's adding a lot of extra interest in this record are the percussion loops. These are 3 loops from the sample pack. Let's go over them. Again, some percussion and like effects kind of sound, these ones, and they support the snare. Making it a bit more interesting, and as well you can see the percussion, it spans from left to right, giving more movement to the record. Same for this one. You got this white noise type snare, again that supports the snare, making it less dull. Same goes with this one. And then everything together with snare. I think that works great with the hi-hats, bass and kick. That's more or less it when it comes to the groove of the record. I added in this scratch sample. I think it works great with the rap vocal. And then we got some textures. And that's basically for the break right here. Most of the percussion is dropped out, so if I wouldn't have those textures there, let me mute this for a second. It's kind of empty, and then when we add in the textures, it just gives it a bit more interest.
Ride or die, I keep boys by my side. CJ Ike, now I gotta roll with ice. Cody's brothers, my guys, know that we fly.
Subtle, but it works. And then we got some effects.
I keep boys by my side. CJ Ike, now I keep boys by my side. Never gonna roll with ice.
And they're actually very quiet. They're not that important in this record. I can mute it.
Fly, know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my side. CJ Ike, never gonna
they add just a little bit extra, but they don't need like loads of white noise and stuff like that. So one more interesting element in the record is the lead sound. A very simple sound, but probably the most interesting thing that happens is in the breakdown once this speeds up. And there's a couple ways you can do it. I sampled this to audio. I don't know where the sound came from, so I can't show you that, but I can show you how to do this with another sound, because I think the technique is more interesting than the sound itself. It's just a basic sound. Let's grab a synth, and we want to have a plug sound. Let's quickly find something. Let's use this, take off the effects. Make it a bit shorter. And let's say we wanna make a record in G. I'm gonna play in just the one note. Let me just solo this for now. So that's the note we're after. And I'm gonna resample this straight away. So I need an audio track, select resampling, solo that one, record this one, and record that in. Get rid of this. And then let's say I want to play 3/16 notes. Let's take the warp off for a second. So I want 3/16 notes like this. Let's say that's what I'm after. I'm just gonna get rid of this. And I'm gonna make sure, so I'm gonna zoom in here, set my grid to 1/16. On 3/16 notes, I'm gonna select that, hit Command J, and then I create a new audio track with that. I can add this into a simpler. I can then hit loop. And because the length is now exactly 3/16 notes, I can just play this and it will be in sync with the record. Yeah. Let's get it into MIDI. I can now just play C3, which is the root note of the simpler, and I sampled it in G, so this is also a G. And you can hear it's in sync. So now that's our basic lead. Let's make this a bit longer. Now you want to speed this up, and then there's different stuff you can do. So you can, one thing you can do is automate the length. So you can right click, show automation. We can automate this and then just make that shorter over time. To get that effect, or we could also use the loop, and then we're going to start at the front and go to the back. It's not so interesting with this because it's short sound, but if you have a longer sound, you could do this to create a different type of effect. Another way you can do it is to take off the loop mode and use the MIDI effect. So we want to grab the arpeggiator. So I took off the loop, and the arpeggiator makes sure it keeps on repeating. So I can set this to whatever speed you want. And you can already hear, by automating this one, you can make it go faster and faster and faster. So again, right click, show automation. We can automate this from slow to fast. And if you don't want it to be, it's synced now, so it's in steps. If you want it to don't go in steps, you set it to free mode, and then you can do it in a free way. So that's two ways you can create this speeding up effect that I use in this record. I think it's an interesting one. You can go mad with it and create weird effects. But that's the way I've done it in this record. Let me play it with everything. So that's basically all for this track. As I said, I thought it would be pretty interesting because usually I work the other way around. I start with samples, but this time I actually started by creating a sample pack and then making a record with those samples. I hope this was helpful to you. You learned some things. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the comments below, and I hope to see you in a next video.